Hi, it's Paula. This is the Common Book Show, and I'm here today with Richard and Sanford
Hello.
and my son Tom on drums. And I have a couple things that I want to read to you to start that are posts that I made on Facebook
Excuse
because,
me.
because I've been listening to and reading all these different things, and I come across a quote from a play by Oscar Wilde, and this play was The Importance of Being Earnest, which is really a funny play. If you're not familiar with it, if you like plays, I highly recommend it. It's on Libby. You can just pick it up. And so this is a line that Lady Bracknell, who is just one of the characters. She is the mother, or she's the aunt of one of the main characters. So Lady Bracknell says, "I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square." It reminded me of our own situation here with the education. In different countries, they teach critical thinking in grade school. They also teach how to recognize fake media in first and second grade. They have their curriculum is such that they're training the kids how to think. We don't do that here, and there's a reason for that. The reason for that is our educational system is designed by the wealthy, and they only want us to be smart enough to help them get wealthier. They don't want us to be. And look how that's served us so far this year. I don't know. I feel that unless you have someone who really cares about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, do you think, this is a question I want to ask you.
Okay.
Do you think that the Department of Education, I had to look this up recently because it turns out we might be losing it soon. Do you think that in 1980, when the Department of Education was formed in this country, it did more harm or more good?
Well, what did they do in 1980? I need more information.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Well, before that, every state was responsible for their own education system.
Yeah.
And the problem being that some states, like New York State, had a higher level of educational accountability. In some states, like Arkansas or Alabama, they had a lower standard for their children. So, in order to make it level across the playing field, the Department of Education was designed, and they're the ones that instituted the standardized tests.
Yeah. I know. I think that's done harm. I think that's done a lot of harm. I didn't teach back before 1980, right? I started
Right.
teaching in 2001.
But you went to school back before 1980.
I certainly did go to school before 1980, and I do believe, as I recall, the tests were designed and administered by the teachers, okay?
Yes.
And I think that is one of the big problems with teaching today or education today is why hire teachers if you don't think they're competent enough to make their own tests, right?
Yeah, and I agree with that.
That's one thing. Another thing is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It worked. I think I got a really good education at Maryvale High School when I was younger, and
I could read when I left grade school.
yeah,
And so many kids can't now.
that's very true. That's kind of a hard question for me to answer, and you'd think a man who's been teaching for 24 years, 24th year in teaching, I'd be able to give you some brilliant response.
I was just curious, and you don't have to, because I I only have the most nominal understanding of what the department does. But, it's one of the things that Trump wants to get rid of is the Department of Education. And at first I thought, how horrendous, the Department of Education. That's what's been in place since the beginning of the country, blah, blah, blah. But it hasn't. It's only been in place since 1980. And I think to myself, but then again, what about these kids that are in these other states where the level of education is so much worse? I mean, don't we need to keep some kind of standard, a level of what? But look, now there's things that aren't going to be taught in certain states.
Well, very often these exams are designed by people who haven't taught in classrooms, okay? And for example, I can speak about social studies. There's been a big push to change the Regents exam, which now they are trying to get rid of as a requirement to graduate, okay?
Right.
But in the last several years, what they've done is they have modeled the Regents exam on the AP exam. And what the AP exam does, the advanced placement exam, the emphasis is on reading and thinking like a historian. So they give the kids these big reading passages. And I'll give you an example. The final essay is called an enduring issues essay, which I think is absurd and ridiculous. I don't think it's a particularly good essay. The kids are given 5 essays, which take a long time to read. The first problem is reading skills are at an all-time low, or they're decreasing. So I think the focus needs to be on the basic skills again, which it isn't. And what they want the students to do is pick 3 of those documents. This is a document-based essay question. And they have to find one enduring theme, an enduring issue that has affected different places and time periods of history, okay? And they have to write about this enduring issue, citing the document, and they have to show how each culture or period of history has dealt with the issue and whether or not they were successful. And has the way in which that issue been dealt with, whether it's, let's just say, conflict, that's a theme, okay, that you could see throughout history. Has it changed over time? Has it remained the same? And how have these different civilizations dealt with it differently? That's a lot of information for a kid to process. It's a 3-hour exam, and that's the end of the exam.
There's a lot of knowledge that's necessary for that. But let me ask you a question: Is there a right answer for the underlying issue?
Well, yes and no. What I mean by that is the essays are graded on a scale of a 1 to a 5. A 1 is very minimal effort, and then they're scaled accordingly. A 5 is a very high-level, articulate, in-depth, analytical essay. It's not just descriptive. Certainly, what a lot of kids tend to do is they copy things from the documents, right? Or they loosely paraphrase it.
Very strong.
And it doesn't show what you just pointed out, which is needed, critical thinking skills. So, and you also said something else that I think is really important. They have to have more understanding of the content before they're able to tackle something like that,
Absolutely.
in my opinion, And so what I try to do as a teacher is I give them an enormous amount of content, and forgive me if one of my fellow teachers out there is listening, but I think even maybe more than a lot of my coworkers, and they're all great teachers in my department, certainly, but I also try to emphasize thinking critically and sorting the wheat from the chaff and being able to corroborate bullshit from what is reasonably likely to be true.
I'm glad you're doing that, because I don't think a lot of teachers do.
I emphasize it from the first day of school.
Yeah.
So, but not everyone does that, but I think the state is going about it all wrong.
Well, is it the state or is it at the federal level?
These are state exams, so it's all done in Albany.
All right. Okay. I'm just curious because I don't know that much about it.
And what's happened in the last several years is I think that the exam grades have gone down, and this pattern has happened before. The state will come up with a new exam, and then as they see the kids can't handle the material, they lower the standards, and the rubric for grading that exam, the standard is lowered a little bit, so they make it easier to pass, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
And then they come up with a new idea that's going to change everything in education, bells and whistles, and then the same pattern happens
Yeah.
again. And right now, because I think, partly because students aren't doing so well in this new format exam model on the advanced placement exams, they're trying to take away the requirement. You know, it's no
Yeah.
longer a requirement to have a Regents exam
Well,
diploma.
I think there should be some way to assure. And I mean, I read the Dick and Jane books when I was in first grade. I didn't know how to read in kindergarten. I just knew
Yeah.
my alphabet. And so they taught me how to read in the first grade, and I learned through the Dick and Jane books, and they were boring, and you know, but I learned how to read. But I'm seeing a lot of problems with kids reading. I don't know what's going on. Is it maybe attention spans because of media? But
Well, not teaching at the elementary school level. I don't know
Yeah.
what goes on there. And I always tell my students, and I know this sounds like a really arrogant and conceited thing to say, but I don't mean it that way. But I tell them, you know, if I could teach you from kindergarten all the way to being a senior and graduating high school, all of you, I would see to it that you would be able to read, you would have a high level of vocabulary, even kids who struggle, because, you know, it's kind of like kids who have lower academic ability. It's like there's toothpaste in the tube, but maybe you just have to squeeze a little harder to get that toothpaste out. You know, when you're
Yeah.
out of toothpaste
Yeah.
and you really have to push to get that last
yeah.
bit, you have to push them a little bit harder, but they are capable.
Yeah.
And I really do feel that if I could if I could be the czar of education,
not all,
you know, maybe
not all
things would be
teachers-
different. But
I think teachers get. I mean, and the behavior problems in the classroom. That's another classic thing that teachers are struggling with. But I think that not all teachers are creative thinkers. You know, you don't have to be a creative thinker to be a teacher. You can get through the curriculum and you can be there. But you know, in order to spark that. To get that spark going, it's hard. That's a hard thing to do.
It's an art and a science, and I think the creativity part, it depends how good you are at the art, right?
Yeah.
And you're right. Some are better at it than others, and that's there is
just
truth in that.
showing interest yourself can get.
Well,
you know.
being really passionate, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, give you an example. The other day I was teaching, I don't know if you know what learned helplessness is. You ever hear of Martin Seligman?
I know it learned helplessness.
You're familiar with the experiment they did with dogs?
No.
Well, it was ridiculous. What I did. I don't like this story very much, but what Seligman did back in the 1960s is he took dogs and he put them in some sort of a box, and on one side of the box, there was electric shocks being administered, and there was a little fence that the dog could easily jump over. Okay.
Yeah.
So he'd give the dog a jolt, not enough to do serious harm, but to give the dog some pain, and the dog would jump over. Okay. And there was no shock on the other side, so he was safe. The next group of dogs, they would put shocks on both sides. So when the dog would jump over the fence, he'd jump back over the fence, and after a while, they'd just give up.
Yeah.
And they would just lie down, okay? So they took that group of dogs, and then they put them in the original fenced, I don't know what to call this box contraption, and where they could escape to safety, they didn't even try. They just laid down and cried because they had the belief in their mind that there was no point in trying. They learned to be helpless.
Yeah.
Right? So why bother trying? So
That's an interesting
when I was
study.
teaching this to my kids, I was on the floor like a dog jumping from one side to the other, and you have to be there, but
Yeah.
it was really kind of funny, you know, and sometimes you have to be very physical,
Right,
and
but
you
that
have to do all kinds of things to
can
get their attention, especially today with cell
You
phones
can
and
certainly
all the,
see.
yeah.
You can certainly see in the comparing that to human beings. You know, if you keep getting beaten down, you're going to eventually give up.
And that's right.
You know,
yeah.
and that's where the
And another way, forgive me for going on about this, but
it's fine.
another way I think of being creative and getting kids' attention and dealing with classroom management issues is developing a rapport. And a way to develop a rapport is to show your own vulnerability and your own humanity, you know. And I gave examples that I won't share on the air right now, but I gave examples of my own life, times when I learned to be helpless, and I was like that dog just who didn't want to try, and I gave up myself. And I think the kids really appreciated that I shared some personal things with them. and they, hey, Mr. Silverstein's a real person, and
Well, it's hard for kids
and
to think of their parents or their teachers as real
yeah,
people.
and they appreciate that. So
Yeah.
so when you have them, they don't want to look at their cell phones,
Cool.
when they're really that engaged.
That's good.
So
That's really
that's
you
the
should be
point
very
that
proud
that's the
of
point
your.
that I'm trying to make.
You should be proud of your
Yeah.
contribution because I had some interesting teachers in high school, and I remember sitting there listening to them and not daydreaming because they were interesting.
But you also had teachers who were probably pretty boring, right? And who just
I
sat
had
there
some,
and
yeah.
never moved. And
I had
yeah.
some abysmal teachers, but the ones that made it interesting. I had a history teacher at one point
Yeah.
who made history very interesting. Although he told us a lot of stuff that wasn't true, and I later on,
Yeah.
as I became an adult, I figured out the stuff he told us that wasn't true.
They were
So
good lies, though, probably, or entertaining, maybe, right?
interesting
So,
lies,
yeah.
So that was the one piece that I had.
That was a good quote from the. I never read that play or have seen it.
Oh,
I
it's
like Oscar Wilde. I'll have to check.
it's very funny, and
check it
it's
out.
on Libby, so you can.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so this one is this one is from. I was listening to a lecture about Gilgamesh. I love mythology, so I was listening to this lecture. It was a Harvard lecture on Gilgamesh, and they had this one professor who was an Assyriologist, and he was really talking about it, and he knew a lot about it, and he could even read it in the Assyrian. I mean, he was pretty remarkable. And then they had some other people come on and talk about other minor issues within the myth. And the one issue was I was watching a lecture on Gilgamesh, and there was a pertinent quote from War and Peace on the overhead to illustrate another hero in search of meaning. So one lecturer was talking about a hero in search of meaning, because that's what Gilgamesh and the other guy, how could I forget his name? I'll think of it in a second. It was a hero in search of meaning. So because I've been trying to work on mindfulness after this election and keep myself in the present and be more present in my life, this quote that was on the overhead projector struck me as something I wanted to post. It says, and it's from War and Peace. So he had learnt to see the great, eternal, and infinite in everything, and therefore to see it and revel in its contemplation. He naturally threw away the telescope through which he had hitherto been gazing over men's heads, and joyfully feasted his eyes on the ever-changing, eternally great, unfathomable, and infinite life around him. And the closer he looked, the more tranquil and happier he was. The awful question that shattered his mental edifices in the past, the question why, no longer existed.
Pierre Bezukhov.
That's who the quote.
I think that's the character who, in his mind. That's the character he's referring to.
Yeah. So I thought, because that's something.
You think.
Yeah, that's something that I've been working on. Is working on staying in the present and not being as analytical. Trying to enjoy a tree or a plant without having to look it up in a book. Just enjoy it for what it is instead of having to know about it. So less intellectual, more intuitive. So I've been into that, but I loved that quote too, because it just mirrored what I'd been thinking about and working on.
And what's the connection with Gilgamesh?
It's because they were talking about other characters in books who were searching for meaning.
Okay.
And so this lecturer was pulling in that character Pierre from War and Peace.
Okay. I've been teaching the Sumerians, and I want to get into. I never read Gilgamesh, and I told my students the other day. I said, I have to,
Oh,
because one of my
it,
Richard knows this young lady, one of my students
yeah,
who's great with mythology,
yeah,
and she knows about it.
yeah.
She is actually teaching me some things that I hadn't read, and
Enkidu.
I said,
That's the name of the other character.
Enkidu,
Enkidu. Yeah.
okay, and I said, I've got a shame on me for not having read that, and
You would
it,
like. I'll send you the link to
so.
that. Because he tells the myth. It's not it's not in detail, but I think you would get a lot out of that if you wanted to
Now,
cover.
wasn't Gilgamesh supposed to be a king
He was a
of
king.
one of the
He
early
was a king.
cities? The,
He was a king,
the
but he was an asshole.
and was the city Eridu or Uruk?
Uruk.
Uruk. Do you
Yeah.
know that Uruk is the birthplace of writing?
I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
cuneiform.
Yeah. Oh,
Started
cuneiform.
there.
Okay. Yeah, I knew
Yeah,
cuneiform. I didn't know it was from.
the city is still. I mean, there's archaeologists have dug up the ruins of this thing. It's almost like a mound.
Well,
Probably one of their temples, the ziggurat step
yeah.
pyramids that they built.
Well,
But
I think you would like the myth. It's a fascinating myth
I'm sure.
because this guy's an asshole. The gods try to figure out how to get him back to a normal place.
Uh huh.
So they send this Enkidu, and Enkidu is like half animal, half human,
Yeah.
and is running with the sheep in
Okay.
the woods, and then the god they send a prostitute to humanize him. So the prostitute
interesting.
stays with him for like I don't know 6 days or something, and introduces him to sex and humanity, the human part
Okay.
of. So then the animals don't want anything to do with him anymore. So then he goes and he goes to find Gilgamesh, and he's going to challenge Gilgamesh, and
Yeah.
it's very enjoyable. It's an interesting myth, but this professor knew it like he knew Happy Birthday. the
Is there a
song.
flood also in Gilgamesh?
Yes,
Yeah?
it's the same.
Like Noah?
It's prior to it's prior to the
Excuse me.
biblical rendition of the flood. So yeah, there's a flood. But okay, and then the last one I want to read is my friend Francine. God bless you, Francine, for your sense of humor and. Okay. This is Francine. I went to high school with her. I wish I would have known her in high school because I didn't. And she had the same struggles and questions, and she was a thinker like I was, and I didn't realize anyway, I met her through Facebook again and then through our reunions. So this is Francine's quote. So I woke up and realized that 71 plus million people swiped right yesterday, and now there is nothing left. So I went in the bathroom to pee, and I looked down at my vagina, and I wondered if it was okay that, I have one, and wondered what ways I'm allowed to use it. I hope Project 25 covers this, because I know there is no mention of these sorts of things in that old rag we used to call the Constitution.
Unless it's the elastic clause. A very loose interpretation.
Yeah. So I just found that remarkable. I just love that. She's angry, but she's angry and she's sad, but she uses humor to work her way out of it, to work her way or even into it. She uses the humor to bounce it. And I really like her writing a lot. She lives in Chicago. So
And who is this again?
Her name's Francine, and she lives in Chicago. And she would have been very helpful to me as a human being in high school. She would have been a kindred spirit that I could have had a real friend, somebody that I didn't have to pretend I was dumb with, just to fit in. I know that sounds terrible, but it's true. So I've already whiled away 25 minutes of our time. So anyway, Richard, do you have something that you want to talk about? A lot's happened in the last week.
Oh yeah, I have a lot. Somebody wrote to me today and said, many of my acquaintances are in serious psychic pain over the election.
Yeah.
And I wrote back, it has to do with reality contradicting our expectations. Some people are reacting by saying, I was wrong. What is reality now teaching me? And I've noticed a lot of people on the left are doing that. And other people are reacting by saying, my expectations were wrong. I need to recover by putting all this out of my mind.
I'm doing.
Which is what that
Which
was
is
your
what I'm
strategy.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I notice that when I discuss the election results with people, they fall into one of those two camps. Either I don't want to deal with it, or what can we learn from this?
Yeah, I'm coming. I mean, I won't always be in this space. I think this is a cushion between my expectations. Expectations always cause problems, and I try to get my friends to see that when they're disappointed at other people's behavior, because you can't really expect to have your expectations fulfilled. It's a fantasy. Let's say you make plans with somebody to go to the movies, and that person calls you 10 minutes before and says, I can't go. You can't rail against that person for not living up to your expectations. You can feel disappointed, but you can't, it can't be the end of the dialogue. You have other choices. You can go to the movie yourself. You can choose not to go to the movie and do something else. I mean, there's other things that you can do. You know, people who are so cemented into those expectations are creating problems for themselves. You know, you have to let go. But I did have expectations in this, but I got to tell you, something happened. I've been meditating every night. Greg and I actually have been meditating mostly together. He's been having anxiety, so it's helping him. So we take a half an hour of guided meditation, something from YouTube. There's all kinds of stuff. And the night before the night of the election, or the night before the election, I think, I meditated by myself because he just wasn't into it. So, and something happened, and I'm not saying it's mystical or anything, but my head must have been clear enough that I realized there's a really good chance Trump might win, and you're just going to have to accept it. So it was the night before the election. I had it was like a reality check, and I braced myself, or I really let go of my expectations the night before. So when he won, I wasn't as devastated as I was in 2016. I had already prepared myself.
And how did Greg react?
He was really bowled over.
Yeah, I knew he was. I intuited it because every morning, early, he sends me the little quote, inspirational quote.
Yeah.
Every day. He's done it for like 4 months or whatever it's been, 3 months. And I didn't get one. So even proactively, I knew he wasn't going to send me one. I knew it.
Wow, because he
And
did tell me.
I sent him inspirational quotes
Yeah.
to get him through the,
he
to look at it more philosophically.
He did mention that to me.
So,
he said Sanford must have known how I was going
I
to
knew
react.
it. I thought of him first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
I knew.
Yeah, so it took him, it's been a couple days now, and he's slowly coming around, but it was harder on him than it was on me. And the thing is, I still went to my fallback thing, Richard. Last time Trump was elected, my fallback was, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he will be a decent president. Maybe he's just bluster. Maybe he will have good people around him. But I don't have that anymore. We know what to expect. And we know that it's going to be different because he's going to have all people who agree with him.
Oh, yes, men, yeah. People
who aren't trying to stop him from doing damage. So I can't. People have been asking me to join these groups, resist 2025, and I feel like I did when I was demonstrating against the war. I'm at the point where I feel like I don't think it's going to make any difference. And that makes me sad, because that's, after going to demonstrations at UB when I was in high school, and then the war still kept on going and kept on going and kept on going. And I mean, it eventually did end, and it was because of the protests and things. But, I was a kid, and I was really disappointed that it wasn't happening faster. Why isn't it happening faster? So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I will get involved. But right now, for my own mental health, because I've found that many of my health problems are caused by my volatility. And we've talked about this a lot of times. So I'm trying to keep myself from getting volatile, because it creates all kinds of health problems for me.
You mentioned Greg's anxiety.
Yeah.
Is it an anxiety based on his thoughts, or is it an anxiety that comes from he doesn't know where?
No, I think he knows where. I have been in such tremendous, especially the first month. In the first month, I was in such pain that I was inconsolable. My pain, and I was taking, stuff for it. And
In
everything.
16?
No, now, from after my surgery.
Oh, I misunderstood
The
you. I
first-
thought you meant you were so upset by the first.
No, the first
Okay.
month. The first month after my surgery.
Okay, I misunderstood what you were saying.
And Greg looked at that, and out of that, he extrapolated our mortality.
And that caused him grief.
It's not so much that we're going to die. He knows that. He's accepted that. It's that what's going to happen to our bodies and to us up to that point. So it's like,
You mean what's going to precede
suffer.
that?
Yeah,
The decline,
if there's
Yeah, right.
suffering,
The
the
deterioration.
deterioration that
precedes
is inevitable for all of us.
And
Yeah.
his mother is in a bad state. She has no short-term memory at all, and he wanted to see her, so we went to see her on on election day after we voted. We went to see his mother, and so he it's been a struggle for him, because he's gotten, his whole new thing now is, my life has been a perfect learning experience up to this point.
So what he thinks.
Now he's thinking this. He's
Okay.
gotten over the regrets, right? So then he says, and now we're in this moment, and this moment's pretty good. But he still can't get over the worrying about the future part.
Wow.
So he's working on that
Yeah, the
now.
past and the present are good. It's just tomorrow.
Yeah. So that's why we're meditating, and I think it's helping a little bit.
That's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
I'm sad about what I think will probably happen in the future.
I know. I said, why suffer it out now when we're going to be suffering when it happens? Why
Or maybe not.
Why have extra right? Or maybe not.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, is the future something that's going to
Well,
happen, or is it something we cause to happen?
It is think about it. Why spoil the present
Right.
with something that might not happen?
Exactly.
Right, but I do it too. I mean, I
But
think
no,
it's
but why?
fairly common.
But it might not. Not only may it not happen, but even if it does happen, there'll be enough suffering in the future. Why prolong it? Why make it worse?
Yeah. Well, what is a Shakespeare? A coward dies 1,000 deaths, or something like that. Like you're
Yeah.
always you're always thinking about
Right,
tomorrow.
right.
Yeah.
So he's working on
I'm
it.
not saying
though.
Greg's a
I mean,
coward. That's not
no,
my point.
But
Yeah.
actually,
That's-
he's come so far with getting rid of the regrets that, to me, it's amazing.
Oh, he used to look back.
It was awful. He was so he would get so depressed and so sad about things that happened before. And now for him to say, my life was a perfect learning experience, which all of our lives were, right? Everything that happened to us, every single bad thing, every single good thing, we learned something from it. My life was a perfect learning experience, So that's great, and the moment now is good. It's just getting past that. and it didn't happen until I was really suffering. I did not know how bad this surgery was going to be.
You mean it happened to him because of your suffering,
Yes.
or you because of your
Yes,
suffering?
because he was watching me suffer.
Oh, and he saw that as another prophecy of what's going to happen to him.
Right. Well, not only him, but me. Because when you're in a relationship, you suffer along with that person.
Yes.
So he basically he felt helpless. He couldn't help me. There was nothing he could do.
Uh-huh.
And then he started worrying about that, and so that's where his anxiety is coming from.
Well, it's interesting because many of Greg's texts that he sends me each morning at 6:30 or 7 a.m. are around that theme.
It's the first
The
thing in
theme
the
of
morning when he
He
goes to the
says
bathroom.
the past is completely behind you is one of
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
You know, your past is perfect just the way it is. I
Yeah.
think was that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, that
thing.
kind
So
of
it's very much in keeping with what you're
Yeah.
saying.
When you visited
kinda-
him in the early days of Parkinson's,
When he was having a breakdown.
Yeah,
he said to you, my greatest fear is that Paula's going to put me in a nursing home.
Right. Yeah.
See, the future.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but he was also, because of the lack of dopamine in his brain, he was,
Neurologically out of whack.
it was a psychotic thing, as well as a physical thing. So he was afraid Karen was going to call the police on him because he had,
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of things that going on, but now he's, the pills have really been a dramatic change. He just had he had a lack of dopamine in his brain, and now he's getting it fed to him 4 times a day.
I was strangely very happy that I was there for him at that moment when I was on the porch with him and you
Yeah.
were out. I think
Yeah.
you were shopping or I don't know what you were doing.
Well, I had to
I
get
think
away.
you
yeah.
came over because
And
she
I-
needed a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was
and
I continued to babysit because that was part of my own mental health. Going to
Yeah.
see my grandkids.
And he always says to me, he said that was my lowest moment, like I was just spiraling out of control when
Yeah.
I was there with him.
And he learned so. I mean, he learned. That is an example of we really learn from negative things more than we learn from positive things. Positive things are just fun. There's not a lot to learn. Oh,
Yep.
I'm learning that I like positive things. I mean, we don't have to learn that. That's, inborn. But when something happens like that, you are faced with, and he's become a much more positive person since that happened. And
Yeah.
he knows it, and I know it, and it's a mitzvah. It's great. Like things have. It's hard for him because there's some physical limitations, but mentally he's a lot better than he was before all that happened because he appreciates now the status quo.
Mm.
Where you don't appreciate status quo until it's taken away from you.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah. So anyway, we're off on another tangent. What else do you have, Richard, on your?
A poem.
Oh, good.
Already.
Yeah.
You're the only
I'll-
person I sent it to who responded.
Well, we'll talk about it more because I read it a couple more times. So let's
Okay.
hear it.
It's called The Supporters of Trump. All right. We had a chance to stand united against fascism, authoritarianism, racism, and bigotry, but we did not. We had a chance to create a better world for ourselves and some of the communities most vulnerable, but we did not. We had a chance to pass down a better, safer, and cleaner world to our children, but we did not. We wanted a leader who embodied our securities and our selfishness. We summoned him up from the depths of our own self-deception, and he has appeared. He is rich because we think we will be rich. He's crass because we are crass. He's unintelligent because we are uninformed. Now America watches as he allows its environment to be ravaged, its children to be shot, its wealth to be hoarded, its workers to be exploited, its poor to starve, its cops to murder, and it's minorities to be hunted.
That's pretty powerful.
I thought so.
You know, it's funny, but I just heard on the. I'm not watching the news right now. I watch the talk shows, which gives you a little bit of the news, you know. But I had to take a break. But I did hear on NPR that the richest people in America, their wealth increased exponentially after Trump got elected because of the stock market.
Yeah, the stock market's one.
In today's New York Times, the value of Tesla stock, because Elon Musk now has got a foot in the door to a cabinet post, it went up to $1 trillion.
What?
Yeah.
I never heard
It
of
doesn't
anything
surprise me.
like that before.
Because the people on Wall Street who only care about making money
Yeah.
said, oh, he's going to do everything in his power to make sure we get all the government contracts, buy the stock. They never ask themselves on Wall Street, is it good to buy the stock? Just will it make money if we buy the stock?
Well, there's a lot of things I'm worried about. Most of the things were brought up in that poem. You know, the environment, but Richard, I think it's even simpler than that and scarier. Karen said to me today, my tenant, she said, you know who the first woman president's going to be? A transgender woman, because nobody in America will ever help a real woman become elected.
Wow.
They'll see it as a man, you know, they'll see it as a man. And she was angry. She was crying. That came downstairs. She was going to walk to the store, but she just had.
I don't think Harris lost because she was a woman. I think there were so many other variables going on, and
I think there were so many men who couldn't vote for a woman that it really made a difference.
I don't know. I don't know.
It was traditional men against women in this election.
Well, my comment to Richard about the poem is, I agree that I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, and I didn't vote for him. And I think he is a reflection of us.
Yes.
Right? But what I don't like about that is it's very extremist in its language. And I think that the left and the right have become so extreme that we don't recognize one another anymore. I don't recognize the left. It's not the left that I knew as a kid. And I think using language like the police are out murdering people and hunting down minorities and all, civil rights did make a difference. Women do have a lot more freedom and equality than they did. Not freedom, that's the wrong word to use. Equality than they did before. I can't just turn my back on all of those things and say they didn't happen. I do not believe that most Trump supporters are fascists and Nazis. I think that's absurd. I think most of the people who voted for Donald Trump are decent human beings with whom they are our brothers and sisters, and I don't really agree with them. But I don't. That to me, that encourages just exactly what that young lady wrote: hatred, more hatred, and those people. And I think that's a big problem in our society today.
How do we get back to the Walter Cronkite news, where they report the news without giving commentary? How do we get back to that? I mean, half the country is watching Fox or Newsmax or whatever the other station is for the right, and half the country's watching CNN and MSNBC, which are skewed to the other side. I mean, they do have people on. They have like representatives of the right come on and in panel discussions with them. But I think we're all being like brainwashed. We're all being brainwashed. I want to know what's going on, and I don't want the commentary. I don't want your opinion.
You don't want to be told what to think. You just
Right.
want to be presented with the information and be allowed to make up your own mind, right? Well, also, news has become entertainment, let's face it. And I remember,
and
I
money
heard,
making.
I don't know if it was on NPR or what news program it was years ago. 15 years ago, and someone who had worked in the industry for a long, long time, he said he saw a big change back in, I don't know, maybe the 90s. And he said prior to that, the part of the building, like in New York City, and I forget what company he was talking about, that dealt with entertainment, was always separate from the news branch. Mm-hmm. And he said in the 90s, they put them together in the same building. And he said that was emblematic of, news becoming entertainment, infotainment. And I think that's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. Rather than just
under Bill Clinton.
Was it under Bill Clinton?
There was a law passed stating that news could now be considered entertainment.
Okay, thank you.
Really, there was a law?
Thank you. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
wow.
Remember cable TV was getting bigger and bigger and bigger?
Yeah.
And the question is, how do we regulate cable TV?
Uh-huh.
And so there were all these meetings about it and everything, over-the-air cable, right? And over-the-air people were saying, how are we going to compete with this new technology that sees news as entertainment when we are, by law, prohibited from doing that?
Yeah.
And Clinton's way of bridging that was saying, well, what if we made you able to consider news as entertainment? Would that be better?
No.
And that's the law that they passed.
Yeah.
That's no. That would be a big no.
And I mean, the other thing is,
I didn't know that.
Obviously, internet has just divided people so much. We're not all tuned into the same ideas and the same things.
I'm
We're
taking a picture of you in your shirt to send to Greg.
Oh yeah. I was hoping he might be here, but I'll wear it sometime. He's out.
I'll send that to him.
Next time I see him, I'll wear it.
He'll get a kick out of it.
In the name of compromise, Clinton did a lot of bad things. Hmm. You know what he did with the banking industry?
Refresh my memory.
For many, many decades, there was a dividing line. The people that make deposits in your bank, you got to keep their money separate from the money the bank invests.
Okay.
He combined them.
Oh, okay.
That's Clinton again?
Yeah.
Fuck.
I know.
Yeah.
He did a lot of damage.
These were bad things.
That's why I say the left is not innocent. I mean, it's both sides of the political spectrum have made some pretty egregious mistakes, and it's not the white hats and the black hats. I don't think it's the big guys versus the bad guys.
I
there's
think
enough guilt to go around.
I think I did in 16 and in 20, but I think I've come more around to the way you're thinking, that first of all these people have been misled by false information. Yeah. Did you finish watching the movie, The Intern?
Yeah, I did.
And so do you see at the end how he says about, never admit you're wrong?
Yeah.
I mean,
you had them all memorized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's the three principles are attack, attack, attack. Never under any circumstances admit that you've made a mistake, and never admit defeat. Yeah, and I think that's
you can see that all.
I'd like to mention a pivotal point in that movie.
Okay.
The cufflinks. Remember the cufflinks?
I do.
Roy, I really love you. Here's these diamond encrusted cufflinks.
And they're just cheap copy imitation.
Ivana says to him, "Those are not diamonds, and that is not gold."
Yeah.
And he sits there stunned.
Yeah.
Then when it comes time for him to make a speech, he goes along with the ruse.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank my good friend for this gift and for appreciating me. He had to make a choice. Do I tell the truth or do I stay with the mask?
Participate in the delusion and the lie, right?
Participate, yeah.
Well, I think those three principles are really very narcissistic. Like, that's pathological narcissism writ large on a big scale. And I think if you were going to describe his character, and I honestly don't, I know that people listening to this might hate me for saying this. I honestly don't think Donald Trump is an evil human being. I think he's pathologically narcissistic. And I've known some people who have those traits, and I'm not, you know who I'm talking about, perhaps. No, none of your friends, but people. Yeah, I'm not going to mention names because I don't slander people, but I've known some people who have Trump-like characteristics, and the same thing, blame somebody else. It's not me. It wasn't my fault. If they lose, they didn't do it. It's not their fault. Just deny it. And go on the attack all the time. It's somebody else. They never accept any personal responsibility for anything. So those are really narcissistic traits, and I think that's the big thing about Donald Trump. Also,
But part of that narcissism is his enjoyment of power.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a drug, man. That's one hell of a drug.
Do you think he was born that way, or do you think his circumstances made him evolve like that?
Maybe hard to say. I mean, that's a great question.
Remember, Paula, you said in the beginning you felt sorry for him.
We both
found
did. We were
there
as
was
we watched it
humanity.
together.
I
yeah.
was almost pissed off that I was watching it because I didn't want to feel any humanity.
Like you might vote for
him.
Donald Trump.
No, I
I'm
wouldn't.
just kidding.
I wouldn't have voted for him.
But
But
then in
know.
the movie, there's like this slow change,
Yes.
and even Roy Cohn notices it.
yeah, the trajectory.
Right. But personality traits, they've done studies with twins, and they found that 30 to 60% of our personality is genetic. It's hardwired.
Wow.
But the rest of it is what you learn. It's your
Yeah.
environment. Is it nature? I mean, it's the old argument: is it nature or nurture?
I think he was a very weak young man in that movie. In that movie, at least the way that he was portrayed.
Well, his father didn't help.
Right, because his father
Right.
was a problem, and he was not self-confident, and I mean there were some real human qualities there. But once he learned the game from Cohn, he pretty much took it as his own. It was his new way of being. Just push your way through.
Do you think he should be held accountable?
Sure.
Of course.
Yeah, that
but
doesn't. You're
he
not
won't.
excused because you have a personality disorder.
Right. He will. All of the charges against him now are being withdrawn. Everything's going away. And that he's going to have. He has pretty much a blank check because of what the Supreme Court said about presidential power.
So the people who hate him, is that their way of holding him accountable? Since they can't bring him up on charges or anything, all they
Yeah.
can do is hate him.
Well, yeah, I guess, but hate is, you know what? It takes too much energy to hate somebody, and it doesn't do anything good for you or for the environment or for anything else. I'm hoping that we get through these next 4 years, and it's just 4 years. I'm hoping that he doesn't change the part of the Constitution that says a president can only run twice. I'm hoping that he doesn't just take, declare martial law and just take over. I mean, there's a lot of things he can do, and I'm hoping I'm being
What frightens me
radical
with Donald Trump, I mean, I want to believe that in 4 years we'll have another election and move on, Two things frighten me about Donald Trump. Number one, the precedent that he has set. Who's the next Trump going to be? And that's what scares me. If Trump himself doesn't frighten me as much as Trump 2, 20 years from now or 15 years. But what does scare me is, and it's highly possible given the nature of the political instability of the world and everything that's going on, if we have a serious national crisis during his administration, how would he respond to it? That scares the shit out of me.
Can you give an example? Because the last one was COVID.
World War III.
Oh, I see. Conflict with another country. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's not impossible.
No, it's not impossible. But I mean, especially since we'll probably be pulling out of NATO.
Yeah.
We're pulling out of the Paris Accord. We're pulling, everything that he's saying he's doing, and it's just it's going to be an
Or-
interesting it's going to be an interesting time in history. We're going to live through a very interesting time in history. It'll be like living through the Civil War.
Well, yeah, may you live in interesting times. It's a Chinese curse. Uh, or, or, the comparison has been made, and I totally disagree with it. This is not 1932 Germany when Hitler was elected.
Yeah.
Because Germany was in grim situation at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, they were suffering from the Depression to a shocking degree. They were humiliated and betrayed in World War I at the Treaty of Versailles.
Right.
The suffering in Germany was unimaginable. We're not experiencing that in the United States. But if something like that did happen domestically, or if there was a foreign war that affected us to that degree, what he would be capable of, that's frightening to me. And you know, given the nature of the world today, how changeable things are and how dangerous the environment is that we live in, it's possible. But I'm hoping that it doesn't happen, and I
Yeah.
don't think it will.
No.
I don't want to be an alarmist.
Well, that's exactly when I go off on these tangents. I think this is a worst case scenario. This is my worst case scenario, and I'm hoping that now he seems to have hired somebody as his I don't remember even chief of staff. Yeah, that who seems more
The person who ran his election.
yeah, she's a more subdued person. Maybe she'll have some good influence over him. But we thought that with the last time, and he just kept firing everybody. He fired everybody that didn't agree with him.
Yeah.
And he was angry because Biden didn't fire people. Like, you didn't fire anybody this whole time he was in office. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's normal. You pick people that you trust and then you stick with them.
I mean, let's hope for the best and prepare for the worst, and, you know, hope that it isn't all that many are fearful might happen, and you know, maybe some things will get better. I don't know. It's possible. In some ways, it's possible.
I know.
You know?
I'm adopting a wait and see, but I kind of know already because I've seen it before.
You've already, yeah.
Anyway, is there anything else you need to touch on in the last 3 minutes?
Do you want something more upbeat?
Sure. Let's end on an upbeat note.
Yeah, we could use some good news, humor.
Humor is always good. Let me look and see what I have that's humorous.
It's probably way down on the line, probably before the election day.
I came across a website.
Oh, yeah? And what's the website?
Tom, can you put it up on the screen?
Scream into the void. Wow, that's pretty good for this time of this time in history. Did you try it?
No.
I wonder what happens when you.
Is it collected in some?
I don't know if it records
depot
your
in the
voice,
cosmos?
or I don't know if it records your voice or if it's like a placebo.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought it was kind of curious.
Like primal screaming therapy.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. Mm-hmm. Primal screaming back in the 80s.
Yeah, John Lennon was into that.
Was he really?
Yeah.
He did a song based on primal scream therapy.
I didn't hear that one.
As the chorus goes on in the song, he starts screaming more and more and more during the chorus.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I'll have to look that one up. I don't know that song.
Yeah.
I'll send you the link.
Thanks.
So now here we go. We're almost out of time.
Oh, I'm reading a great book.
Oh, what are you reading?
Freud's Interpretation of Dreams.
Oh, that's a good book.
Man, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, no shit, but it's
yeah.
It's just every possible facet of dreaming and the causes of dreams are explored. And I mean, I'm sure since then there's been more work with cognitive psychology.
Yeah,
and,
there
I
has
can
been.
only
It's
imagine, obviously, but it's really what gets me about it is Freud has not been entirely discredited. There's this idea that it's all just about sex. He opened up our exploration of the unconscious mind.
and that's why Jung had to separate from him because of that. But
Because of his obsession with sex.
But
right.
I still think there's a lot of validity.
There's a
to
lot of
Freud.
validity to Freud.
Yeah.
People project, right? Projection is a Freudian defense mechanism, and that's a valid thing that we all do.
Okay.
So.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you read
That's
that.
good
Sounds
stuff.
like a good.
Yeah,
that sounds like I haven't read that in a long time, but I have read that and a couple other. All right. So bye everyone. It's been really fun to
Bye.
be here after the election.